Jake Morrison sat in the cold metal chair and stared across the table at the alien who was about to destroy everything. The creature had purple skin that glowed softly in the dim light of the council chamber. Its 4 eyes blinked in sequence, as it read from the data pad in its 6-fingered hands. "The motion before us today is simple," Counselor Vexithera said in her mechanical voice. The translator device around her neck turned her alien sounds into words Jake could understand. "Humanity has proven too aggressive and unpredictable for full council membership. We propose reducing their status to observers only." Jake felt his jaw tighten but kept his face calm. 3 years. 3 years of humanity proving themselves over and over again. 3 years of saving alien lives and solving problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries, and this was their reward. The council chamber stretched out before him like a massive amphitheater. Hundreds of different alien species sat in curved rows that rose up toward the domed ceiling. Some looked almost human but with strange colors, or extra limbs. Others were so alien that Jake still had trouble believing they were intelligent creatures. There were floating gas clouds that spoke through crystal speakers. There were rock-like beings that moved so slowly they seemed like statues. There were insect creatures with too many legs and compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights like broken mirrors. All of them were about to vote on humanity's future, and Jake already knew how it would end. Captain Lisa Hayes sat in the observation gallery above the main floor. She wore her dark blue uniform with the Earth insignia on her shoulder. Her brown hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her green eyes were focused on Jake with concern. She had commanded the human diplomatic fleet for 2 years now. She had seen every insult and every dismissal that humanity had endured from these creatures. The Krellian war chief Thokmar stood up from his seat. He was 8 feet tall with gray skin like stone and muscles that bulged under his ceremonial armor. His voice boomed across the chamber without need for a translator. "Humans are children playing with weapons they do not understand," he said. His small red eyes glared down at Jake. "They ended the Darkstar War too quickly. They did not follow proper military protocols. They used tactics that we had never approved. This shows they cannot be trusted with important decisions." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Jake wanted to laugh. They were complaining because humanity had ended a war that had killed billions of aliens over the past century. They were angry because human forces had accomplished in 6 months what the combined galactic military had failed to do in 100 years. The ethereal Veloth representative drifted forward. Its body was translucent and seemed to be made of shifting light. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through crystal caves. "The humans lack the wisdom that comes with age," it whispered. "Their species is barely 300 years old in space. We have been traveling between stars for 10,000 years. They must learn patience and respect for their elders." More nods and sounds of approval. Jake looked around the chamber and saw the same expression on hundreds of alien faces. Condescension. They looked at him the way adults looked at a child who had spoken out of turn. Dr. Amy Foster sat next to Lisa in the gallery. She was humanity's chief science officer, and had spent the last 3 years working with alien researchers. Her blonde hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and her blue eyes were bright with anger behind her glasses. "This is insane," she whispered to Lisa. "My research team just developed a cure for the Zephyrian genetic plague. We've solved 17 different medical crises in the past year alone, and they want to kick us out because we're too young." Lisa nodded but said nothing. She was watching Jake carefully. She knew that look on his face. It was the same expression he had worn just before he ordered the final assault on the Darkstar stronghold. It was the look of a man who had made a decision that would change everything. The vote began. One by one, the alien representatives announced their positions. The Altarian Commerce Guild voted to demote humanity. They were still angry about the trade dispute from last month when human efficiency had cost them millions of credits in profits. The Centaurian Federation voted against humanity. The Andromedan Collective voted for demotion. The pattern continued row after row. Jake counted the votes in his head. 847 species represented in this chamber. 846 of them were voting to strip humanity of their rights. Only humanity itself, voted against the motion. When the final tally was announced, Counselor Vexithera's bioluminescent patches flickered with what Jake had learned was satisfaction. The motion passes by a vote of 847 to 1, she announced. Effective immediately, humanity is reduced to observer status. They may attend council sessions, but may not vote on any matters of galactic importance. The chamber erupted in cheers and applause. Hundreds of different alien voices created a cacophony of celebration. They were celebrating the demotion of the species that had saved their galaxy. Jake stood up slowly. The noise in the chamber began to die down as aliens noticed his movement. He reached up and removed the translator device from around his neck. Then he placed it carefully on the table in front of him. When he spoke, his voice was clear and strong. He used perfect galactic standard, the formal language that all diplomats learned. His pronunciation was flawless after 3 years of study. "We came here seeking equals," he said. "We found only masters seeking servants. Consider this our resignation." For a moment, the chamber was completely silent. Then the laughter began. It started with a few chuckles from the Altarian section and spread like a wave across the amphitheater. Soon hundreds of aliens were laughing at the human who thought he could threaten them. Thokmar pounded his ceremonial hammer against his chair. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Go then, little human," he roared between laughs. "Crawl back to your tiny blue world. See how long you survive without the protection of the council." The Veloth representative's laughter sounded like tinkling bells. "They will return within a cycle," it whispered to its neighbors. "Humans are too dependent on galactic trade to survive alone. They will come back begging for readmission when their colonies start to starve." More laughter filled the air. Jake looked around the chamber one last time. His dark eyes met the gaze of dozens of different alien species. All of them were smiling or making whatever expression their species used to show amusement. None of them seemed concerned about humanity's departure. Jake turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet that followed his movement. Captain Hayes and Dr. Foster met him at the chamber doors. Neither of them spoke as they walked through the corridors of the station. Behind them, the alien laughter resumed. It followed them all the way to their ship. As their shuttle pulled away from the council station, Jake looked back at the massive structure one final time. It was built from materials from 100 different worlds and designed to show the glory of galactic civilization. Lights flickered in its windows where thousands of aliens worked to govern the galaxy. "Send the message," Jake said quietly to Captain Hayes. Lisa nodded and activated her communication device. Across the galaxy on hundreds of human worlds and stations, people received the same simple message. 2 words that would change everything. Operation Exodus. The Galactic Council had made their choice. Now humanity would make theirs. The first sign that something was wrong came from the mining colony on Kepler 7. The Altarian cargo ship arrived to pick up their regular shipment of rare metals and found nothing but empty buildings and silent machines. Captain Zelquin walked through the abandoned streets of the human settlement with growing confusion. Yesterday, this place had been bustling with activity. 5,000 human miners and their families had lived here for 8 years. Now there was no one. The strangest part was how clean everything looked. The buildings were intact and undamaged. The mining equipment sat exactly where it should be. Personal belongings were still in the houses. Children's toys lay scattered in yards. Food was still fresh in refrigerators, but every single human was gone. "Where did they all go?" asked his second officer, a nervous Altarian named Vexcol. Captain Zelquin touched one of the mining machines with his blue-scaled hand. It was still warm from recent use. "I don't know," he said, "but they left sometime in the last few hours." Similar reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian science station on Proxima Centauri found their human research partners missing. The joint military base on Vega Prime reported that all human personnel had vanished overnight. Trade stations, diplomatic outposts, and exploration camps. Every place that humans lived or worked was suddenly empty. Commander Ryan Parker stood in the middle of New Montana's capital city and tried to understand what he was seeing. This had been one of humanity's largest colony worlds with over 2 million people. The city should have been alive with traffic and voices and the sounds of a busy civilization. Instead, there was only silence. Ryan was a veteran of the Dark Star War and the current head of colonial security. His gray hair and weathered face showed the stress of too many battles. He had seen evacuation sites before. He knew what they looked like when people left in a hurry because of enemy attacks or natural disasters. This was different. This was impossible. "Sir," called Lieutenant Ben Carter from across the town square. He was young and had only been assigned to colonial security 6 months ago. His voice cracked with confusion. "You need to see this." Ryan walked over to where Ben was standing next to a row of shops. The windows were clean and the displays were still perfectly arranged. But something was wrong with the buildings themselves. "Look, at the foundations," Ben said, pointing down. Ryan knelt and examined the base of the nearest building. The concrete foundation ended in a perfectly smooth edge. Below that was untouched soil with grass already beginning to grow through it. "They didn't just leave," Ryan said slowly. "They took the buildings with them." Ben nodded. "The whole residential district is like this. The buildings are just gone. But there's no debris, no damage, nothing. It's like they were carefully lifted right out of the ground." Ryan stood up and looked around the empty square. In the distance, he could see the landing pads where ships used to arrive daily with supplies and passengers. The pads were still there, but they had been stripped of all equipment. Even the metal plates that formed the landing surfaces had been removed so precisely that the ground underneath looked like it had never been disturbed. Dr. Amy Foster sat in her laboratory aboard the exploration ship Endeavour and watched the galactic communication networks with growing amazement. She had been monitoring alien broadcasts for 3 years now, as part of her job as humanity's chief science officer. She knew the normal patterns of interstellar communication. This was not normal. Every human frequency had gone silent at exactly the same time. Military channels, civilian broadcasts, trade communications, research data streams. Everything had stopped at 1432 Galactic Standard Time. That was approximately 6 hours after Jake Morrison had walked out of the council chamber. Amy's blonde hair fell across her face as she leaned over her console. Her blue eyes were wide behind her glasses as she tracked the pattern of silence spreading across the galaxy like a wave. "Computer, show me the timeline of communication blackouts," she said. A holographic display appeared above her workstation. It showed the galaxy from above with thousands of bright dots representing human settlements and ships. As Amy watched, the dots began going dark in a specific pattern. First, the outer rim colonies went silent. Then the research stations in unexplored sectors. Then the trading posts along major shipping routes. Finally, the core worlds and military bases. The pattern moved inward like a carefully planned withdrawal. Estimated time for complete evacuation. "At current rate?" Amy asked. 47 hours and 16 minutes. The computer replied in its calm, mechanical voice. Amy sat back in her chair and tried to process what she was seeing. The logistics were impossible. There were over 800 human settlements scattered across the galaxy. Moving 2 billion people and all their equipment and belongings should have taken months or even years of preparation. Somehow, humanity was doing it in less than 2 days. Captain Steve Johnson guided his massive cargo ship through hyperspace toward the coordinates he had been given 12 hours ago. The Hercules was one of humanity's largest freight vessels, capable of carrying enough supplies to support a small city. Today, it was loaded with something much more valuable. The disassembled pieces of 3 research laboratories. Steve's brown eyes were focused on his navigation display as he followed a route through hyperspace that he had never seen before. The course took his ship through regions of space that weren't on any galactic charts. Somehow the navigation computer knew exactly where to go. "Captain," called his engineer, Carol White, from the engine room. "I'm getting readings I've never seen before. These hyperspace tunnels we're using, they're not natural." Steve nodded. He had suspected as much. The route was too perfect, too direct. They were traveling faster than should have been possible and avoiding every sensor net and monitoring station in council space. "How long until we reach the destination?" he asked. 3 hours, sir." "But Captain, the energy signatures I'm reading suggest we're not just avoiding council sensors. I think we're invisible to them." Steve had been a cargo pilot for 15 years. He had traveled every major shipping route in the galaxy. He had never encountered technology that could hide ships, this completely from alien detection systems. The question was, how long had humanity possessed this capability? On the surface of Kepler 442b, a team of Centaurian observers watched in stunned silence as human mining ships descended from orbit. The massive vessels moved with impossible precision as they began dismantling the largest mining operation in this sector of space. Mining supervisor Kexthrall had worked with human crews for 2 years. He knew their efficiency and skill. But what he was watching now defied every principle of engineering he understood. The human ships used some kind of energy beam to cut through solid rock like it was soft clay. Massive drilling platforms that should have taken weeks to disassemble were being broken down and loaded in hours. Entire mountains that had been carved into terraced mining sites were being restored to their original shape. "How are they doing that?" asked his assistant, A.A., young Centaurian engineer named Yelnova Kexthrall shook his head. His green skin had turned pale with shock. "I don't know. The tools they're using, we've never seen anything like them." One of the human workers walked over to their observation post. It was a woman with red hair and calm brown eyes. She wore the same mining gear that Kexthrall had seen humans wear for years, but somehow she seemed different now. More confident, more in control. "Sorry for the short notice," she said in perfect Centaurian. "Our contract with the Galactic Mining Consortium has been terminated. We'll have the site restored to pre-mining conditions within 18 hours. "But this is impossible," Kexthrall sputtered. "You can't dismantle this entire operation in one day, the equipment alone." The woman smiled. "Thank you for the business opportunity. We wish you success in your future endeavors." She turned and walked back to her crew. Kexthrall watched as the human ships continued their impossible work. In the distance, he could see them using technology that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. By the next morning, Kepler 442b looked exactly as it had before the first human miners had arrived. The mountains were restored, the rivers ran clean, and native vegetation was already beginning to grow back. There was no sign that the planet had ever been touched by industrial mining. The only evidence that humans had ever been there was a small metal plaque embedded in a boulder near where the main mining complex had stood. It read, "Thank you for the opportunity to serve. Humanity wishes you prosperity and peace." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of worlds. Human settlements were vanishing without explanation. Human workers were completing impossible tasks in impossible time frames. And through it all, humanity remained polite, professional, and absolutely silent about where they were going or why. The galactic news networks began covering the story as a curiosity. Surely this was just a temporary reaction to the Council's decision. Humans were probably just trying to make a point before returning to negotiate better terms. They had no idea that they would never see humanity again. 3 months after the last human had vanished from galactic space, Counselor Vexithera stood before the emergency assembly and tried to explain how their civilization was falling apart. Her purple bioluminescent patches flickered with distress as she read from the datapad in her trembling hands. The council chamber was only half full now. Many species had stopped sending representatives because they could no longer afford the travel costs. "The Galactic Defense Force reports combat effectiveness has decreased by 70%, she announced to the scattered delegates. "Without human tactical advisors, our military units are unable to coordinate properly against pirate raids." General Thokmar sat in his massive chair and felt smaller than he had in decades. The proud Krellian warrior who had mocked humanity's departure now faced the collapse of everything he had spent his life defending. "This is impossible," he growled. "Humans were just advisors. They taught us a few new tricks, nothing more. Our warriors have fought for centuries before humans ever left their world." Admiral Kextolan of the Centaurian Navy stood up slowly. His green skin had lost its healthy glow, and his forearms hung limply at his sides. General, with respect, you are wrong. The humans didn't just teach us new tricks. They redesigned our entire military doctrine. The Admiral activated a holographic display that showed recent battle reports. Red markers indicated successful pirate attacks across dozens of star systems. 3 months ago, the shipping lanes between Alteria and Centauri were completely secure. Human tactical advisor Pete Collins had established patrol patterns that protected 200 worlds with only 50 ships. Yesterday, pirates destroyed 17 cargo vessels in that same region. The hologram shifted to show the current deployment of galactic defense forces. Ships were scattered randomly across space with no apparent coordination. Without Colonel Collins and his staff, we don't understand how their system worked. We have 3 times as many ships in the area now, but they're not in the right places at the right times. The pirates know this and they're taking advantage. Merchant Lord Zelquin of the Altarian Commerce Guild spoke from his section of the chamber. His blue scales had turned pale gray with stress, and his voice cracked as he spoke. The military situation is only part of our crisis. Trade volume has dropped by 80% in the last 3 months. The shipping routes that humans designed were 60% more efficient than our traditional paths. Without them, transport costs have tripled. He gestured weakly at his mostly empty section of the chamber. Half of my guild's merchant houses have declared bankruptcy. The other half are considering abandoning interstellar trade entirely. Dr. Yelnova of the Centaurian Medical Institute raised one of her 4 hands to request permission to speak. When Counselor Vexthera nodded, she stood on shaking legs. The economic and military problems are serious, but they are not our worst crisis. The Zephyrian genetic plague has begun spreading again. Without Dr. Kate Morgan's research, we cannot continue developing the cure. Murmurs of fear rippled through the chamber. The Zephyrian plague had killed billions over the past century. Human medical research had been the first real hope for stopping it. Dr. Morgan was 3 months away from completing a universal cure that would have saved my species from extinction. Her departure means we must start over from the beginning. Our population continues to decline by 2% each month. The ethereal Veloth representative drifted forward. Its translucent body was dimmer than usual, and its voice sounded like wind through broken crystal. We consulted the quantum probability matrices about humanity's return. The calculations show 0 possibility of voluntary human contact with galactic civilization. They have chosen complete isolation. This statement sent waves of panic through the assembled delegates. The Veloth were known across the galaxy for their ability to predict future events with startling accuracy. Chief Engineer Mordak, of the Andromedan Collective, stood up from his section. The tall gray alien's usually confident posture was replaced by obvious exhaustion. The quantum communication network is failing. We estimate complete collapse within 6 months. The modifications that Engineer Carl Brooks made to increase signal clarity have become unstable without human maintenance. The holographic display changed to show the galactic communication grid. Thousands of relay stations appeared as green, lights connected by glowing lines. But many of the lights were flickering red or had gone dark entirely. We have tried to repair the network using our original technology, but the human modifications are too complex. Every time we attempt to fix one problem, 3 more appear. Soon most worlds will be completely cut off from interstellar communication. Counselor Vexithara felt her bioluminescent patches dim with despair. The scale of the crisis was beyond anything in recorded galactic history. Not even the Dark Star War had threatened the basic infrastructure of civilization itself. How is this possible? She asked the assembly. Humans were the newest members of our council. They had been in space for less than 3 centuries. How could they have become so essential to our civilization in only 3 years? Professor Lixandra of the Veloth Academy of Sciences drifted to the center of the chamber. As the galaxy's leading expert on xenopsychology, her words carried enormous weight. We have been studying this question since the evacuation began. Our analysis suggests that humanity's integration into galactic society was not random or accidental. It was planned. The chamber fell silent. Professor Lixandra's body glowed brighter as she continued. Human behavior during their 3 years of council membership follows a pattern consistent with systematic intelligence gathering. They requested access to technical specifications for all major galactic technologies. They volunteered for positions that gave them oversight of critical infrastructure. They established themselves as essential personnel in every important system. She gestured to the darkened sections of the chamber where species could no longer afford to send representatives. Most telling of all, humans consistently refused to share their most advanced technologies with us. They claimed their military and industrial capabilities were limited, but evidence suggests they were deliberately concealing far greater capacity. Admiral Kextolan nodded grimly. Our analysis of Dark Star War records supports this theory. Human fleet movements during the war showed tactical knowledge that should have taken decades to develop. Their weapons were more advanced than they admitted. Their ships moved through space using principles we still don't understand. General Thokmar pounded his fist on his chair. Are you saying humans were spying on us? That they infiltrated our civilization? Professor Lixandra's glow flickered with what her species used to indicate uncertainty. Not infiltration, General. Evaluation. We believe humanity was studying galactic civilization to determine whether it met their standards for long-term membership. The implications of this statement hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Many of them had lived for centuries and considered themselves representatives of ancient and wise civilizations. The idea that humans had been judging them was almost incomprehensible. They found us wanting, whispered the Veloth representative. That is why they left. They observed our behavior, analyzed our capabilities, and decided we were not worthy of continued association. Merchant Lord Zelquin laughed bitterly. Worthy? We are the inheritors of civilizations that spanned the galaxy before humans had even invented fire. How dare they judge us? But even as he spoke the words, Zelquin knew they rang hollow. His merchant empire was crumbling. His people were facing economic collapse. His guild could no longer function without the systems that humans had built. For them, Dr. Yelnova spoke quietly from her seat. Perhaps the question is not how they dared to judge us. Perhaps the question is what they saw in us that made them decide to leave. The chamber remained silent for long minutes as the delegates contemplated this possibility. Outside the station's windows, the stars looked the same as they always had, but everything else had changed. Finally, Counselor Vexathara spoke the yay. Words that everyone was thinking but no one wanted to say. We need them back. Whatever it takes, however we must humble ourselves, we need humanity to return. Without them, our civilization will not survive another year. But even as she said it, Vexathara remembered the look in Jake Morrison's eyes as he had walked out of this chamber 3 months ago. It had not been the look of someone who would ever consider coming back. It had been the look of someone saying goodbye forever. Ambassador Kylthera of the Centaurian Federation commanded the largest search fleet in galactic history as it approached the coordinates where humanity's homeworld had once orbited Sol. Her forearms worked frantically at the control panels, while her green skin flickered with nervous energy. Sensor readings confirm it, reported Captain Zorthan from his position at the tactical station. The massive Krellian warrior's voice was barely above a whisper. Earth is gone. Not destroyed. Gone. The main view screen showed empty space where a blue and green world should have been spinning peacefully around its yellow star. The other planets of the Sol system remained in their proper orbits, but the third planet and its moon had vanished without leaving any trace of debris or energy signatures. How do you move an entire planet? Asked Dr. Velnara, the expedition's xenopsychology specialist. Her Veloth form shimmered with confusion as she studied the readings. The energy required would be beyond the output of most stars. Navigator. Quexamora checked her instruments for the 100th time in the past hour. The insectoid alien's compound eyes reflected the bridge lights as she spoke in her clicking voice. The gravitational pattern suggests the planet was removed carefully to avoid disrupting the orbits of neighboring worlds. Whatever technology they used, it accounted for every variable in the solar system's stability. Ambassador Kylthara had been preparing for this mission for 2 months. She carried authorization from the Emergency Council to offer humanity complete control of galactic government if they would only return. The message was recorded in her personal databanks. ready to transmit the moment they made contact, but there was no one left to receive it. "Take us to Proxima Station," she ordered. "Maybe we can find clues at their military installations." The journey to humanity's former military headquarters took 6 hours through hyperspace. When they arrived, the search fleet found another impossibility waiting for them. Proxima Station had been built inside a massive asteroid that orbited the red dwarf star Proxima Centauri. The installation had housed 50,000 military personnel and served as the command center for human fleet operations across 3 sectors. It had been carved from solid rock over a period of 8 years and powered by fusion reactors built deep in the asteroid's core. Now the asteroid was just an asteroid again. "Full sensor sweep," Captain Zorthan ordered his crew. "Look for any sign of artificial construction." The results came back within minutes. The asteroid showed no trace of ever having been modified. The rock formations were completely natural. Whatever process had been used to remove the station had also restored the asteroid to its original state. Chief Engineer Dexmarl studied the readings with growing amazement. The elderly Andromedan's gray skin had turned almost white with shock. "This is impossible," he announced to the bridge crew. "We have detailed construction records for Proxima Station. The human engineers removed 17 million tons of rock to create the internal chambers. That rock is back now, but it's not fill material. Its original asteroid composition in its natural formation." Dr. Velnara drifted closer to examine the engineering reports. "Are you saying they put the asteroid back exactly as it was before construction began?" "Not just exactly," Dexmarl replied. "Perfectly. Down to the molecular level. The rock formations match what our geological surveys predicted the asteroid would look like if it had never been touched by artificial mining." The implications were staggering. Humanity possessed technology that could not only move planets, but could reverse complex construction projects with precision that bordered on the miraculous. "Sir," called Communications Officer Yeltrix from her station, "I'm detecting energy signatures in the Kepler 442 system. They match the patterns we recorded during human mining operations." Ambassador Kyle Thera felt a surge of hope. Set course, immediately. Maybe some humans remained behind. The fleet arrived at Kepler 442b to find something that shattered their understanding of human capabilities even further. The planet that had been strip-mined for rare metals was now covered in lush forests and clean rivers. But floating in orbit above the restored world was a structure that defied every principle of known engineering. "What is that thing, Captain?" Zorthan asked as he stared at the viewscreen. The structure was roughly spherical and appeared to be made of some kind of crystalline material that reflected starlight in impossible ways. It was massive, easily the size of a small moon, but it generated no gravitational field that their sensors could detect. "Energy readings are off the charts," reported the sensor operator. "But the signature doesn't match any known technology. It's like it's drawing power directly from space itself." Navigator Quexmora's voice clicked with excitement. "Sir, I'm reading similar structures in 17 other systems, all in locations where humans had major installations." Ambassador Kyle Thera felt her hopes crumble. These were not human colonies or bases. They were something else entirely, something that suggested human technology was far more advanced than anyone had imagined. "Open a communication channel to the structure," she ordered. "All frequencies." The response came immediately, but not in any language or format that their computers could understand. The signal was pure mathematics, transmitted in patterns that seemed to encode information at quantum levels. Dr. Velnara worked frantically to decode the message. Her Veloth abilities allowed her to process complex data patterns faster than most species. "It's a warning," she announced after several minutes of analysis. "The structure is telling us to leave this system immediately." "A warning from whom?" Kyle Thera asked. "Unknown. But the transmission methods are consistent with what we know of human communication protocols, just far more advanced." Captain Zorthan moved his massive frame closer to the view screen. Could humans have built that thing? The question hung in the air without an answer. The structure in orbit was beyond anything that galactic civilization could create. If humans had built it, Then their true technological capabilities were centuries ahead of what they had revealed during their time in the Council. "Sir?" called the navigation officer urgently. "Multiple contacts approaching from the edge of the system. Speed and trajectory suggest artificial acceleration." Dozens of objects appeared on the sensor display, moving toward the search fleet at velocities that should have been impossible for any known spacecraft. They were small, roughly the size of fighter craft, but they generated energy signatures that dwarfed most capital ships. "Are they human vessels?" Ambassador Kyle asked. "Unknown design," the sensor operator replied. "But their formation patterns match human military tactics." The approaching craft suddenly stopped, maintaining perfect formation at a distance of 1,000,000 kilometers from the search fleet. They made no aggressive moves, but their presence was clearly a message. "We're not welcome here," Dr. Velnara observed quietly. Ambassador Kyle made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Transmit our message. All frequencies, all protocols. Let them know we're here to negotiate humanity's return to the Council." The response came not from the mysterious craft, but from the crystalline structure itself. This time, the message was in perfect galactic standard. "Your presence has been noted. Departure from this system is required within 1 standard hour. This is not a negotiation." The voice was clearly human, but it carried an authority that no human had ever displayed during their time in galactic society. It was the voice of someone who expected immediate obedience and was prepared to enforce it. "Please," Ambassador Kyle transmitted back. "We need to speak with your leaders. The galaxy is collapsing without human assistance. Billions will die if you don't return." The silence stretched for long minutes. When the response finally came, it was brief and final. The Galactic Council made their choice. We made ours. Departure required in 57 minutes. Captain Zorthan looked at his instruments and saw that the unknown craft had moved closer. They were now in position to intercept the search fleet if it tried to approach the crystalline structure. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I recommend we comply with their request." Ambassador Kyle stared at the view screen and realized that she was looking at the future of human civilization. These structures, these ships, this technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics. This was what humanity had become in the months since leaving galactic space. They had not been refugees or exiles. They had been colonists preparing to build something greater than the galactic civilization they had left behind. "Set course for the Council Station," she ordered with a heavy heart. "Maximum speed." As the search fleet jumped to hyperspace, Ambassador Kyle composed the report that would terrify the Galactic Council. Humanity had not simply left their civilization, they had transcended it, and they were never coming back. 1 year after humanity's departure, Councillor Vexathera sat alone in the empty council chamber and watched her civilization die. Her purple bioluminescent patches had dimmed to barely visible flickers, and her once proud posture had collapsed under the weight of galactic collapse. The great amphitheater that had once held representatives from nearly 1,000 species now echoed with emptiness. Only 43 species still maintained council membership. The rest had either declared independence, formed smaller regional alliances, or simply ceased all interstellar contact when their communication systems failed. The quantum network had collapsed completely 6 months ago. Most worlds were now isolated, cut off from the galactic community that had defined their existence for millennia. Trade had virtually stopped. The great shipping lanes that had connected distant stars were now hunting grounds for pirates who faced no organized resistance. Vexathera was reading the latest casualty reports when something impossible happened. Every screen in the chamber suddenly activated simultaneously, displaying the same message despite the fact that the communication systems had been dead for months. The transmission was crystal clear, broadcast in perfect galactic standard with subtitles in every known language. But what made Vexathera's patches flare with shock was not the technical impossibility of the broadcast. It was the face that appeared on the screens. Jake Morrison looked exactly as he had 1 year ago when he walked out of this chamber. His dark hair was still neatly combed, his human features still calm and composed. But something in his eyes had changed. There was a depth there that had not existed before, a sense of vast knowledge and quiet authority. "Greetings to the surviving members of the Galactic Council," he said in a voice that carried to every corner of the empty chamber. "This message is being delivered simultaneously to all inhabited worlds in this galaxy, regardless of their current communication capabilities." Vexithara felt her breathing become rapid and shallow. The technical requirements for such a broadcast were beyond anything in galactic science. It would require technology that could penetrate any shielding, reach any distance, and translate instantly into thousands of languages. "I am Jake Morrison, former ambassador of the Terran Colonial Administration. I am speaking to you from Terra Prime, our new capital in the Andromeda Galaxy." The camera view pulled back to show Jake standing on what appeared to be an observation deck. Behind him, through massive, transparent walls, Vexithara could see something that made her mind struggle to process what she was witnessing. Floating in space was a structure so vast that it defied comprehension. It appeared to be a constructed world, not a natural planet, but something built from materials that gleamed with their own inner light. Ships moved around it in patterns too complex to follow, and in the distance, other similar structures were visible among unfamiliar stars. 1 year ago, your council voted to reduce humanity to observer status. You made it clear that we were not welcome as equals in your civilization. We accepted your decision and acted accordingly. Jake's voice remained calm and professional, but Vexithara could hear the finality in his words. This was not the beginning of negotiations. This was a statement of facts. In the time since our departure, we have established our own civilization beyond your galaxy. We have built worlds that exist according to our own principles. We have created technologies that serve our vision of what intelligent life can become. The view shifted to show scenes of human cities that seemed to float in space without visible support. Gardens grew in the vacuum between stars, sustained by forces that made no sense according to known physics. Children played in parks while massive construction projects reshaped entire solar systems in the background. We understand that our departure has caused difficulties for your societies. This was not our intention, but it was an inevitable consequence of your decision to exclude us from meaningful participation in galactic governance. Vexithara found herself leaning forward in her chair, desperately hoping for some hint that Jake might offer to return, some indication that humanity would reconsider their isolation. Therefore, we are providing you with the technical specifications necessary to restore basic functionality to your communication networks and industrial systems. This information will allow you to maintain your current level of civilization and prevent further collapse. Technical data began scrolling across the screens, complex equations and engineering diagrams that would take teams of scientists months to fully understand. But even a quick glance showed Vexithara that this was exactly what the galaxy needed to survive. These specifications are a gift, offered freely without expectation of payment or obligation. They represent the minimum technology necessary to prevent the complete breakdown of interstellar civilization. Jake paused, and for a moment, his professional composure seemed to soften slightly. We harbor no ill will toward any species or world. Our departure was not motivated by anger or revenge. We simply recognized that our vision of what galactic civilization could become was incompatible with your established systems. The camera pulled back again to show more of the incredible vista behind Jake. Vexithara could see what appeared to be artificial stars being constructed, their light carefully tuned to support the needs of the impossible structures that surrounded them. Humanity wishes you success in building the future you have chosen. We will not interfere in your affairs, and we ask that you do not attempt to contact us again. Vexithara felt her hopes collapse completely. The formal language made it clear that this was not a conversation. It was a final statement from a civilization that had moved beyond the reach of galactic politics. This transmission is being sent from our new home in Andromeda, approximately 2.5 million light-years from your current location. We have found the universe to be far larger and more wonderful than we ever imagined during our time in your council. The view shifted one final time to show the Earth itself, impossibly relocated to orbit a new star. The familiar blue and green world looked exactly as it had in the Sol system, but it was surrounded by structures that transformed it into something magnificent and strange. To those species who treated humanity with respect and friendship during our time among you, we remember your kindness. To those who did not, we bear no grudge. All of you will always be welcome to build your own paths to whatever future you can imagine. Jake stepped closer to the camera and his expression became almost gentle. The galaxy is vast enough for many different kinds of civilization. We have chosen to build ours according to our own understanding of what life can become. We hope you will find wisdom in choosing your own path. The transmission ended with technical specifications for repairing the quantum communication network, detailed instructions for rebuilding industrial capacity, and complete medical databases that would save millions of lives across hundreds of worlds. But there was no contact information, no method for response, no indication that humanity would ever listen to anything the galaxy might want to say to them. Vexithera sat in the silent chamber for hours after the transmission ended, staring at the now dark screens. Around her, the empty seats seemed to whisper with the voices of species that had once filled this space with the confident sounds of galactic governance. They had believed themselves to be the masters of the universe, the inheritors of ancient wisdom, the guardians of civilized order. In their arrogance, they had dismissed humanity as newcomers who needed to learn their proper place. Now they sat in darkness while their former subjects built wonders among distant stars, creating technologies that made galactic science look like the fumbling attempts of children. Humanity had not just left their civilization. They had transcended it so completely that they existed in a realm beyond galactic comprehension. The worst part was the kindness in Jake Morrison's voice as he delivered their final goodbye. There had been no anger, no satisfaction, no desire for revenge. Just the patient courtesy of adults explaining reality to children who were finally old enough to understand it. Humanity had judged galactic civilization and found it lacking. Then they had quietly removed themselves to build something better, leaving behind only the basic tools necessary to prevent complete collapse. They were never coming back, and the galaxy would spend the rest of its existence wondering what wonders might have been possible if they had chosen differently when they still had the chance.